Okay, now that we are equipped with a attack ability, we're gonna go fight this guy. He came after me, but I dodged. I'm gonna shoot him. Oop, I missed. Oop. Now I can. There we go. I got him. I keep missing, but I hit him sometimes. Here we go. There, he was in the middle of charging, and I finally finished him off. Okay, we're going to learn how to do that. Welcome back to LewyT Amusement Academy, part 22. Today we're going to give our slime character the ability to shoot projectiles to attack the enemy character and do some damage that way. So as usual, I like to start with the scripting. So the first thing we need is a new script. So we go create mono-behavior script, and we're going to call it Damage Projectile. Okay, Damage Projectile is not a very complicated script. It's actually fairly short. It just needs the Unity engine, and it has just a few properties. Damage amount, as you might imagine, the amount of damage that it does when it hits another character, and it has a start sound and a hit sound. So this is what happens when the projectile starts flying through the air, and then hit sound is when it hits something. And it has an audio source to play those sounds, and the first thing in the start method is it gets the audio source, and then it plays that start sound. And the only other thing that this script does is it has an on trigger enter. So as you can imagine, this is going to be a trigger collider, and when some other collider touches it, or it touches the other collider, it checks to see if it's a character, and if it is a character, it does the damage amount. If it has an audio source, which it does, it will play the hit sound regardless of whether it's a character or not. And then it destroys itself so that this projectile doesn't just keep going. It basically disappears after the first hit. The next script is the character script. It's very minor changes. It's using the starter assets. That's for the third-person controller. And the only thing it does is when the character dies, it checks for the third-person controller and disables it if it's there. And then it does the same thing for the player character script. It checks if it's there and disables it. And the reason I did this is because I noticed that I was still able to aim and shoot my projectiles when the player character was dead. So I wanted to make sure that those two scripts were also disabled whenever the character dies. The last and most significant script change is the player character script itself. It's using starter assets. It has a few more properties at the top level. It needs the projectile, so this is just a game object. We will drag into the slot the prefab of the projectile. And we need a projectile speed. This is how fast it shoots it. And then a projectile delay, meaning that we can just shoot as fast as we can click. There's just a 1 second delay. To implement that delay, we need a last projectile time. And then for aiming, I want to use the camera. So I need a reference to the main camera. Starter assets inputs, that's related to our controls. We need a reference to the dialog manager. And then we have a Boolean that is called any UI open. So here's the thing is when we have UI panels like the dialog manager or the grid, inventory, anything like that, we want to prevent clicking in the user interface panels causing the character to shoot projectiles. So we need to be able to detect if any UI panel is open. And we have a new method called onPrimaryFire. This is just when you click the left mouse button. I think also pressing enter activates it. Checks that it's no UI is open. It checks that the current time minus the last projectile time is greater than the projectile delay, so that way it won't do anything if enough time hasn't passed. it calculates a velocity, and it's basically checking the character controller's velocity property. This is how fast you're moving. So if you shoot while you're moving, your projectile should be affected by your own movement as well as its shooting speed. So it's getting that velocity, and then it's instantiating the projectile. It's instantiating it at the current position of the character plus a little bit of an upward, because the current position is like at the ground, and it wants to add a little bit of vertical positioning to that so it doesn't create the projectile right at the ground. And then we're rotating it based on the main camera's rotation. And then we're going to use that projectile that we instantiated, and we're going to get the component of the rigid body, and then we're going to get the linear velocity, and we're going to set that linear velocity equal to the player's velocity plus the camera's angle, transform.forward, and then we're going to add a little bit of a vertical lift to it, so it's not shooting straight forward, it's shooting up a little bit, so it has a little bit of an arc. Gravity will pull it down, so we want to aim a little bit high, and then we multiply that by the projectile speed. That's that property at the top. And then we're going to reset this last projectile time to the current time, and that way you can't just click again immediately and shoot again. You have to wait for that timeout. In the awake method, we're getting the starter assets component. We're finding any object that has a quest manager on it, and we're finding any object that has a dialog manager on it. So these are the UI panels that we want to be able to override. So this is just what happens at the beginning, and then we invoke this ManageCursor method every 1 second. And then in the onEnable method, we're setting that primary fire as the player.attack.performed method. So we want to add primary fire to that. So whenever we click the left mouse button, it will invoke this method. Now we have a new method, ManageCursor, and this is the thing that's running every second, once a second. We're getting the inventory object, we're getting the chest UI, we're getting the store UI, the dialog UI, and the quest manager UI. So these are all these different objects, but we're just checking to see if they're active. We're not getting the reference to the object because we already have that. We're checking. So these are all going to be Boolean values, true or false, whether or not this particular UI panel is open. And then we're going to say any UI is equal to all of these UIs separated by OR operators. So we say if the inventory is open, or the chest is open, or the store is open, or the dialog panel is open, or the quest panel is open, then any UI will be true. So if any one of those is true, this will be true. And then based on that any UI open, we're going to lock the cursor if there's not any UI open, and we're going to set the cursor input for look if any UI is not open. And then we're going to check this any UI open again and set the lock state. So if any UI is open, we're not going to lock the cursor. We want to be able to move the cursor, and we want it to be visible. We want to be able to see the cursor if we're in a UI. But otherwise, if there's no UI open, then we want to lock the cursor so that it doesn't move off the screen, and we want it to be invisible so it's not in the way when we're trying to see what's going on. And whenever we close the quest manager, we're also going to do a ManageCursor, and when we open and close the inventory, we'll ManageCursor. Now, we wouldn't necessarily have to do that because this is going to be ran every second anyway, but these are ran, these open-close panels are invoked directly from this script. So to make them a little bit more snappy, I decided to put this function call right inside these methods. So you get the effect of the cursor appearing or disappearing immediately, as opposed to the other UIs will have to wait for the every second delay. And then that's all the changes to the scripts. Okay, now we need to create our projectile prefab. So I'm going to go to the scene view. I'm going to right click in the hierarchy and then just create a 3D sphere. we'll name it Slime Projectile. Get closer to it. Move it up where I can see all of it. We're going to go to Damagers, the folder for Damagers, and I'm going to create a material. And we're going to just call it Slime Projectile Material. So here, we'll drag this material onto that. It doesn't change it much, but now we can set the base map on this material. Or we can see what we're doing. We can pick a green material. You can search for green. So you can find some plenty of green materials on the Unity Asset Store. I'm not going to focus too much on that. So we'll just use this green material. Now back to the slime ball itself. It's got, by default, it has a sphere collider, but it's not a trigger. We want it to be a trigger. We want to make sure we include everything except the slime. That way you can't hurt yourself with your own slime balls. You can do it this way, or you can say everything and then go to the exclude and select slime. Or you can just have the everything with slime in the include. We also want to add a rigid body component. Rigid body, this will allow it to move under the influence of gravity. We don't need to change anything here. We also want to add an audio source component. We want to set spatial blend to 0. Spatial blend, it's already by default set to 0. And we want to set the Doppler level also to 0. 3D sound settings, Doppler level, by default it's set to 1. Now what happens is if it's making a sound and it's moving, it will change the pitch of the sound. So we don't want that, okay? I'm going to go ahead and collapse these. One more component to add, and that is our damage projectile script. So this is where we can set the damage amount. So let's say 20. And then we can also set the start sound and the hit sound. For the start sound, there was this one little boop noise that I like that says decline, 29 decline 09, and then you can hear it just as I clicked on it. Okay, that's what it will sound like when you shoot. And the hit sound is the 15 impact flash 02. So that's what it sounds like when it hits something. Now, you're welcome to choose any other sounds that you want. Play around with all the different sounds that you can find. And I want to also thank LewyT again for those free sounds. Okay, last thing we want to do is take this slime projectile that we've set up and drag it into the project. So it will be a prefab. And then we want to delete them in the world. Delete this one in the scene view because it's just sitting there and it'll just fall onto the ground and disappear. Okay, the next thing we need to do is go to the player character. I'm going to turn off some of these gizmos. The player character has a player character script, and we now have a place for the projectile. It currently says none. We want to drag the slime projectile into that slot. So by default, it has a projectile speed of 5 and a delay of 1. We'll test that out and see if we like those numbers. We also need a reference to the main camera. So the main camera is inside this nested pack main camera. Drag that in there. But we also have a slot for the starter assets inputs. I think this automatically detects, but you can also drag it in from here. We want to make a change in the starter assets inputs, and we want to check the cursor locked. And then that way, just by default, the movement will lock the cursor. Like we've been doing in the past, we can see the mouse move around on the screen and we can interact with stuff. But now we want it to lock the cursor, basically move it to the center, and then also it'll be hidden. Okay, one last thing that we need to take care of is now that the cursor is locked and not visible, we want to make something to show where we're going to shoot. So we're shooting kind of toward the center of the screen. So whichever way we turn, it will be kind of in that direction. But I like having some sort of like a crosshairs to indicate where that center is. Now, I'm going to leave it up to you to customize your crosshair. But let's go to the canvas, and we're just going to right click and create a UI canvas image. Go look out of here. We're going to name it aim dot. You can name it whatever you want. But I don't like it positioned at the very end of the canvas. I want it to be kind of up near the top so that it's behind other stuff. So if you have anything else that's in front of here, it will cover up that aim dot. Now it's kind of big. What you can do is you can set an image, a source image to whatever you want. You can make these bigger so you can see them. It's just kind of up to you what you want it to look like. I think I'm going to pick this circle here and maybe make it a little bit smaller. So I'm going to change the scale to like 0.5. So we'll just have this little circle in the middle of the screen so that we can tell where we're aiming at. Okay, I think we're ready to test. We should be able to click anywhere. You hear that noise? That was it, our projectile hitting something. Let's aim out into the air. It's still hitting. It appears and it hits something immediately. I think it's because it's too big, it's touching the ground. This slime projectile, let's scale it down. It is kind of big. Let's make that like a 0.25. Let's try it out. So let's fight. Okay, you see it, you went boop, and then the projectile could be seen shooting out in front just a little bit. It's not shooting very fast, and so it's falling and hitting the ground before it goes very far. So let's fix that. Okay, so back on the player character, we want to change this projectile speed. Let's go to with 10 instead of 5, so it'll be about twice as fast. And let's try it out now. Right, let's shoot there. Oh, it shoots much further, especially when we aim up. Let's try to hit that guy. If I get too close, he'll come after me. Oh, I hit him. He got me more. Gotta dodge. I keep missing. My upward aiming is a little bit high. Okay, if I aim downward. There we go. Now, as you could see, our aim dot circle here did not really accurately represent where the projectile was going to go. It shoots upwards so that it can go further, and in many cases, you accidentally shoot over the top of the enemy if you're not careful, if you haven't figured out how to aim. Go to this aim dot. We could move it up in its position on the screen. Say, move it up like there. Say this is more where you're going to really be aiming at. We can even move it to the left. Because our camera is slightly to the right of our player character, we could move the aim dot slightly to the left to make it more in front of where the character will be shooting. So let's try that positioning. It's a little more accurate. Ooh, I think I hit him. Yeah. This is much more easy to work with because my aiming is more accurate. Now I wanted to, while I'm here, I want to go back and interact with some of the other things in the world. Some of the other script changes I made allow us to still do things in the inventory and store, and we have our quest panel. When we open a panel, we can use the mouse. When we close it, the mouse goes away. And when we talk to something, when the dialogue appears, the mouse is there, so we can click on buttons. But when the dialogue goes away, the mouse goes away. So that's a kind of a necessary feature in order to combine like mouse click attacks and also allow the use of user interface. Okay, now that we are equipped with a attack ability, we're gonna go fight this guy. He came after me, but I dodged. I'm gonna shoot him. Oop, I missed. Now I can. There we go. I got him. I keep missing, but I hit him sometimes. Here we go. There, he was in the middle of charging, and I finally finished him off. There we go. That is our projectile attack. One thing I want to remind you is now that our game hides the cursor and locks it, we can't just go up and click the stop button. We're going to have to hit escape, and then it unlocks the cursor, and we can click the stop button. If you click anywhere, it locks it again. If you open the inventory, it basically unlocks the mouse. It actually stops the movement of your character unless you're already moving, and then you can click the stop button that way. Okay, thank you for watching LewyT Amusement Academy Part 22. If you learned something down here in my lab today, please like or subscribe and share this video with your friends, frenemies, enemies, and even your nemesis. So now that we can defeat enemies a couple different ways, next time let's implement enemy drops, meaning when an enemy is defeated, they drop some items for you to pick up.